Together we'll weather whatever tomorrow may bring. And maybe we'll find true peace of mind if we always remember we can be kind.
Good morning, everyone. Wow. 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 Well, that was beautiful, Susan and David. Thank you for sharing that. Beautiful. There's really not a whole lot else that I need to say, but you know me, they pay me to do this, so I feel like obligated, you know. John, would you go ahead and hit the blank on that? Do you know how to do that on the projector? On the left side of the menu there. Yeah, there we go. Let's pull that up. There it is. Okay. So the last couple of weeks we've been talking about a set of ideas and principles that we use here in the spiritual community and the leadership of a spiritual community. And I've used this in every spiritual community that I've been in since, probably since I came out of ministerial training. And it's been such a valuable gift for me because it relates not only to how we can be more in community with each other and how we can keep our connections and keep our hearts open more to each other and still have disagreements with each other. And how we can go through those disagreements and go through the conflicts that happen in life in a way that really does help us to enhance not only the community, but also each other in our own spiritual unfoldment. One of my teachers was a wonderful guy, is a wonderful guy named Ram Dass. How many of you are familiar with Ram Dass? Ram Dass is just a beautiful spiritual light, and I had the great opportunity of having come to my center in Charlottesville, Virginia a few times and do some workshops for us. And one of the things that Ram Dass taught me, and I've just always loved this, is that relationships are our highest yoga. We learn more about ourselves through our relationships than any other way. Because reality is, if we are not learning through our relationships, we try to be in a vacuum or try to be in isolation, the reality is we don't really see ourselves. You realize that? It's too hard for us to see who and what we really are, both in terms of what we're projecting out into the world and also what our essence is. And so in a very real sense, part of our unfolding spiritually is being in relationship with each other. In fact, everything is in relationship. You realize that? We're always in relationship with everything in our life and our world. And everything that goes on in our life and world has been brought into our experience for the purpose of helping us to unfold in a spiritual nature, to helping us to unfold our possibilities and our potential as spiritual beings. We are created in the image and after the likeness of the divine. We're created in the image and after the likeness of love. And yet, because we're very creative, sometimes we forget that. And we get creative in other ways, don't we? And we use that creative power and energy to create experiences that don't feel like that don't look like that sometimes. And so part of our waking up is learning how to move back into that space of really beginning to align ourselves more fully with our own possibilities and potential in life. When we're in community, and these 12 principles I've found have worked really well, not only in community, but they actually work well in our partner relationships, with our husband-wife, children relationships. They work well in our work relationships. If we will look at the underlying ideas and principles and begin to practice some of these ideas, we'll find that our relationships begin to not only shift, but they actually shift us. And that's one of the really powerful aspects of what we're working with here. So we covered a few of them last couple of weeks. One of the things in relationship and in community, we recognize and honor that there's always going to be conflict in some way. Well, I would say always. That's not a good way of saying it. There is going to be conflict from time to time, And we recognize that, and we don't try to avoid the idea or believe that somehow that we're not going to have that. Sometimes people get the impression that because we're a community that's based on love, that there's not ever going to be a conflict. And I've had people actually leave the church because there was a conflict, rather than working through with love to try and help move through the conflict. And so it sometimes takes courage to be a part of a community. It takes courage to be in a relationship. It takes heart. It takes a willingness to recognize that we're going to have disagreements. And sometimes they're not going to feel good. But no one else is making us feel that way. And a lot of it's just really learning how to decide that, oh, we're going to move through this in a way that lifts us up and also lifts up the other. So we recognize there are going to be conflicts. We affirm that there's the truth. We look for and recognize that there's a presence and a power in us and in our relationships that's more than us as individuals and more than the other is an individual, and that there is a coming together for a higher purpose. And that higher purpose is to help us to bring forth gifts that are within us that we perhaps had not seen or experienced before. We talked about we commit to prayer. And prayer really is not praying that the other person will wake up and see things the way you're supposed to. As much as we think that's what it's supposed to be, prayer is really about changing our awareness, changing our ability to see the circumstance and situation from a different place. Does that make sense? We examine where we're coming from and are willing to look at our own ways of looking at things and be willing to be changed ourselves. And then we go to the other directly. You know, we have a tendency, and we've been taught in this world, if there's a conflict, that you talk to everybody in the world except the person you have the conflict with, right? We call those the parking lot conversations when you're in churches. You know, we go and we have this meeting and we have this disagreement, and we put on a nice, smiling, loving face, and we go out in the parking lot and we tell them everybody else in the world about that person that we have the disagreement with, but we don't talk to the person. Now, that's what children do, right? It's not a mature way of communicating. It's not what we do in a mature community. And it's not what we do in a relationship with our partner. Sometimes, you know, we have a tendency to talk about our partners to everybody else but our partner. And that's really unhealthy for us and for our partner and for our relationship. And we actually can be causing damage to our relationship by not really being direct. So we honor mature, direct conversations. And we know that in those direct conversations, the possibility of a higher connection can happen. And we know that, and so we're willing to take that opportunity. So when we find ourselves in a conflict with someone, really resist the temptation to go to everybody except that person. Take some time to go within first. Pray, center yourself, listen to your heart, and be willing to go to that person, not with the purpose of getting that person to change, but simply being in the place of willing to express and say what is true for you. And if we go into that place first and come into that connection, that alignment with who and what we are, with the heart center, we'll find that we'll be able to express what's true for us in a way that others are more likely to be able to hear. Does that make sense? And there can be a coming together, and there can be an upliftment of spirit in that respect. And then we go with the spirit of humility, a spirit of patience and gentleness. And humility really does simply mean humbleness. And humbleness simply means to be teachable, to use that opportunity to learn what it is that we need to learn about the circumstance or situation, about the other person for that matter, and about ourselves in that connection and in what's going on for us in that. Does that make sense? And then the next one we talked about was we're, number one, quick to listen. We have a tendency when we're in a conflict to think that our most important thing is that we are heard. And I'm going to suggest to you that is the opposite of what needs to happen in order to move into a higher energy, a higher awareness, a higher vibration. So we go with the willingness, not so much that we have the need to be heard. And notice what I'm saying, the need to be heard. If we're attached to our need to be heard, you can bet that we've turned our ears off. Make sense? And so part of our work is to learn how to go with a spirit of willingness to hear and not hear just the words, but to begin to hear what's underneath the words. Begin to look for what are the underlying expressions of feelings and needs that the other person has, and that's going on for them as well. There's a fantastic work that we did a series on, a couple of years ago, maybe getting time to do another one, I think, but this is a powerful work that will absolutely transform your life if you're willing to look at it and work through it. And it's called The Eye of the Storm. And notice the I in this. It's not an I like this, it's an I, the eye of the storm. And one of the ideas and principles is, when you find yourself in a conflict situation, oftentimes you'll find that same kind of energy shows up over and over again. Have you noticed that you tend to have the same similar kinds of conflicts? Well, the question that we ask then is, what's the common denominator? I am, exactly. So we do need to take a moment and recognize that all of these things are really coming up in and through and from us in some way. And it's there to help us to learn more about how we can be and show up in the world in a more clear space. Does that make sense? So this week, we're going to move down. I want to move on to the next set of principles, the next three. And a little bit, there we go, slow to judge. There we go. So when we go in and we find ourselves in a place of conflict, we want to go in with an understanding and attitude that it's not about trying to get the other person, how shall I put this? It's so important for us to go in with the idea of trying to honor the other person involved in the challenge and the conflict. And that's sometimes difficult because we've been taught that if someone doesn't agree with us, then they automatically are our enemy. We see that a lot in our politics today, don't we? And it's unfortunate because it really is not the truth of who and what our politicians truly are, and it really is not working. It doesn't serve the higher good. We see that in our relationships oftentimes. We find that, one of the primary purposes that sometimes people go into counseling for is so that the counselor can show the other person how wrong they are. Right? And one of my good friends is a couples counselor, and he always gives this, and I told this last week, he always gives this example that when a couple first comes in, one of the first things he has them do is he has one of them imagine that they're at the front of the house and then the other one at the back of the house, and he asks both of them to describe the house. And as you can imagine, they don't give the same description, right? And then he asks the question, which one of you is right? And the reality, of course, is that they're both right, but they both have a different perception of what they're looking at. They're looking at the same thing, but they have a different understanding and a different point of view because of the way they're positioned. And so they have their positionality. And their position is not right or wrong, it's just how they're seeing it. And so from there, he's able to say, all right, let's switch places. You go to the back, imagine you're at the back of the house, you imagine you're at the front of the house, and now describe your house. And what you find is that if you can take the other's point of view, you can see things through the other person's eyes in some way, you're going to have a very similar description of the reality of what's going on. Powerful image and awareness, and a powerful tool for helping us remember when we go to another to not necessarily try to get them to see things the way we see them, but be open to seeing how they are seeing and seeing what their point of view might be. Now, you don't have to agree with it, but if you can at least see it, you can begin to actually come into a closer connection of a place of alignment and a place of truth with that other person. So we're slow to judge. We suspend judgments and enrolling others in our position. We discard threats and we act in non-defensive and non-reactive ways. And I had a wonderful little story about judgments and how we tend to do things, I love stories. There was actually a church had just changed ministers, and it was served there. The next minister came in was a woman minister, and one of the parishioners was having a hard time with this. And it wasn't having a hard time because this new minister was a woman. He was having a hard time because he was in the habit of going fishing and taking the pastor fishing with him and really enjoyed going fishing with the pastor. And knew he was going to miss this, and just knew that this new woman pastor knew nothing about fishing, just made that an obvious assumption, And so the pastor heard about this, and she decided, I'm going to go fishing with him. So she told him, anytime you want to go fishing, you let me know. And he said, well, all right. And so they made an arrangement, and they decided to go fishing. They go out fishing, and he's making the assumption that she knows. And he happened to be right in this case. She knew nothing about fishing. So they get in the boat, and they're going out, and the first thing, she doesn't have a clue how to bait the hook. So he has to bait the hook for her. So he's baiting the hook, And then, all of a sudden she snags something, and she didn't know what to do. She didn't even know how to reel it in. So he goes over, and he's helping her reel it in. And then they get it in the boat, got a nice fish on, and she had no clue how to take it off the hook. So he goes and he takes it off the hook for her, And then, a wind comes up, and it's starting to get kind of chilly. And she's, oh man, I had a jacket in the car. I should have brought that. I wish I'd remembered to bring that. And he says, well, would you like me to take the boat back to the shore so you can get your jacket? And she said, no, that's all right, I'll take care of it. So she stands up, steps out of the boat, and walks on the water over to the shore. And he looks at her with his mouth open and just kind of shakes his head. Says, I knew it. She doesn't know how to swim either. Okay, so we all have our judgments in some way, right? Well, it's important for us not to prejudge another person. It's important for us not to prejudge certain circumstances and situations. And sometimes, even when we see amazing things in another person, we discredit those through our own filters, through our own judgments. And part of our work is to learn how to look at our own mental, emotional processes, isn't it? And one of the most valuable ways we can observe those and pay attention to those and notice those is in the moment when we find ourselves or catch ourselves in that place where we are making a judgment of someone. And if we can do that and observe that activity a little more quickly, we can actually distance ourselves from that way of looking and thinking, and we can make shifts, and we can choose a different way of looking at things, a different way of seeing. And that's really a big part of what we're called to do. I love this story. There was a minister of a more traditional kind of congregation, a little more conservative perhaps than our group, and they were the young minister was teaching the youth group about the evils of drinking and the evils of smoking, and he was driving home with his teenage daughter and went about a block away and noticed that there were some young boys there in the park right next to the church, and they were lighting up their cigarettes. And he said, I can't, but can you believe that? Not a block away from the church and already smoking. And she just kind of looked over him and says, yeah, and can you believe that? Not a block away from the church and already judging. That was an interesting sound. Woo! As I don't remember who said this first, but I love this line. I think it was one of the Marx brothers. I resemble that remark. So it's valuable for us to look at our own process and circumstances and situations and recognize when we are in that energy. So in Romans it says, Romans 2:1, it says, so every single one of you who judges others is without any excuse. You condemn yourself when you judge another person, because the one who is judging is doing the same things. Notice that. You condemn yourself when you are judging. I really, there's something about this understanding that when we judge another person, we're really not saying anything about the other person, are we? But we are speaking volumes about ourselves, aren't we? So we're speaking volumes about how we're showing up. We're speaking volumes about how we are presenting ourselves in the world. And so when we find ourselves in that place where we are feeling and looking through the eyes of judgment with another person, it's valuable to recognize that everyone and everything in this world is really a mirror of who and what we are and how we're showing up. And if we want to see ourselves in that way, that's fine. But if we want to experience more acceptance and appreciation of who and what we are, and our uniqueness, and our differences, and our quirks, and our foibles, let's be sure that what we are sending forth is that same energy and vibration. In Galatians, Oprah Winfrey says, if you spot it, you got it. And so when we make a judgment of another person, recognize that you wouldn't see that in another person unless you had some aspect of that within your own nature, within your own being. And so that's part of why we actually have this opportunity, is to see those places within us where we perhaps have those same kind of energies and qualities. They may not look exactly the same. They may show up in a little bit different form. But the energy and the consciousness and the vibration is still there, or we wouldn't see it. Isn't that true? So the more we can come into an experience of any kind of difficulty and challenge with the understanding it's there to reveal to us how we can show up differently, then we can use that as a gift in our lives. In Galatians chapter 5, 22 through 26, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, fulfillment, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against things like this. Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified Jesus. Let me read this again. Those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified self with its passions and its desires. If we live by the Spirit, let's follow the Spirit. Let's not become arrogant and make each other angry or be jealous of each other. Let's come with a spirit of love and gentleness and self-control. Notice it says self-control. That's one of the things that I think we kind of get stuck in, is that when we get into a conflict situation, we're actually trying to not control ourselves. We're actually trying to control another in order for us to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to feel good about ourselves in some way. So we're trying to get somebody else to be the way we think they're supposed to be. And oftentimes that seems like that's a full-time job, and I don't know anybody that's been really very successful at it. Do you? Have you ever been successful in getting someone to be the way you want them to be? I know you may get them to, you can judge and you can criticize and you can get them to maybe jump a few times, but you're not going to get them to change, are you? Doesn't really work, does it? No, sadly. No, it really doesn't work. But I can tell you, if you come with a spirit of humility and openness and willingness to, and a curiosity even for that matter, I think it speaks to a level of curiosity in a relationship that you're open to learning and growing, willing to be curious about what could be better in this circumstance and situation with us, and what would be a better answer for both of us coming together. And that kind of brings us down to willing to negotiate. We work through disagreements constructively. Sometimes it's better to have an example that is not like what we're shooting for in order to understand what it is that we're shooting for. Sometimes the best illustrations is what not to do. So I came across this wonderful little opportunity to learn about what not to do and how to turn a disagreement into a feud. How would you like to learn how to turn a disagreement into a feud? It's probably a good thing to know. Be sure to develop and maintain a fear of conflict, letting your own feelings build up so you are in an explosive frame of mind. If you must state your concerns, be as vague and general as possible. And then the other person cannot do anything practical in the situation to change anything. The other one, of course, is to assume that you know all the facts and that you're totally right. Speak prophetically for truth and justice and do most of the talking. And number 4, with a touch of defiance, announce your willingness to talk with anyone who wishes to discuss the problem with you, but not take any steps to initiate such a conversation. And then number 5, latch tenaciously onto whatever evidence you can find that shows that other person's the other person is merely jealous of you. That'll work well, won't it? And then number 6, judge the motivation of the other party on any previous experience that showed failure or unkindness. Be sure and bring back the past. It's always valuable to bring all those other failings in. It really helps to solidify your point of view. So, and then of course a part of that is avoid possible solutions that go for total victory avoid possible solutions and go for total victory and unconditional surrender. And don't get too many options on the table, whatever you do. And then, of course, number 8 is pass the buck. If you're about to get cornered into a real solution, indicate that you're actually without any power to settle this, to make any decision. And you need to bring in your partner, your spouse, or your bank, or someone else to actually. Does that make sense? So those are the things, ways that you can turn a dispute into a feud. Probably valuable to know not what to do. So let's look at one of the things that our principles tell us that we can do that will really move us more to a negotiated understanding and a win-win kind of situation. One of all, we identify issues and interests and the needs of all. Now, this is a really art that we can learn, and it's a practice. Learning how to listen for the needs that are underneath the communication. I want to invite every one of you, and I'm going to tell you, if you really want to learn how to do this, on the last Sunday of this month, the 28th, not next Sunday, but the 28th, we're going to have a wonderful teacher and presenter and author and speaker doing a powerful, powerful workshop called Be Peace. And it's based upon the works of Marshall Rosenberg and the HeartMath Institute combined. You guys have heard me talk about Marshall Rosenberg and the peace, nonviolent communication that he teaches. It's a powerful, transformative way of understanding and communicating in life. And then the HeartMath Institute is a powerful way of really tuning into our heart energy and making sure that we're coming and communicating from that place. So I highly recommend that you come and participate in that, because if you want to get the practical nuts and bolts of how to do what we're talking about up here, that workshop is going to be out of this world. So she's going to come speak for us on Sunday morning, then she's going to do a workshop in the afternoon. So do show up for that if you want to really get the nuts and bolts of that. Listening for the needs that are underneath the communication. We generate a variety of options for meeting all parties' needs rather than defending our own individual way. Now, as right as we may be, there's a possibility that there might be even something that is just as right or maybe even more fitting for the circumstance and situation that is working toward needs that bless each one involved. We collaborate, we evaluate the options by how they meet the needs and satisfy the interests of all sides, not just our own values. We collaborate in working out a joint solution so that each side gains and grows and wins. We're looking for win-win solutions here. We cooperate with the emerging agreement. Now, once we make an agreement, that's the other part of it. Recognize that the agreement oftentimes can be an evolving thing, and so we shoot not for perfection, but we shoot for progress. I love, there's a wonderful song by David Roth that's called Practice Makes Progress. Practice doesn't make perfect. It just is an ongoing thing, and so it does make progress. And so we're not really trying to seek perfection. What we're trying to do is get something that really will help meet the needs a little more of everyone involved. And we reward ourselves for each step forward toward agreement. We acknowledge that, okay, we're making progress here. Gandhi once said that an honest disagreement is often a good sign of progress. And an honest disagreement involves clear communication and recognizing what it is that we're working with. And then this one, I think, is so valuable for us that we maintain a steadfast energy of love involved in the communications and in the negotiation experience. We're firm in our commitment to seek a mutual solution, not necessarily just our way of being, but a mutual solution. We're steadfast in acting out of principle, in other words, doing the right thing. One of our primary intentions is to move into a place where we are honoring and doing what is highest and best, what is right, doing the right thing. And this is one that I really love and really makes a huge difference in how we are showing up. We're hard on issues and soft on people. We're hard on issues and soft on people. Let's say that together. We're hard on issues and soft on people. So can you see the power of really being really clear and firm and in alignment with the truth of our being, with the issues, but also being in that place of acceptance and peace and love? You know, I was trying to look up this quote, and I didn't get time to find it. It came to me this morning, so I usually like to look these up and find. But there's a wonderful quote that I got about state your truth clearly, but never let the other out of your heart. State your truth clearly, but never let the other out of your heart. I think that it was actually an Emerson quote. I'll have to go back and look that up and when I get a little more time. But so it's important for us to stand in the truth of who and what we are, and as a part of that, not let ourselves be pushing someone out of our energy of peace and love and acceptance. We're steadfast in love, and we are hard on issues and soft on people. There was a woman and a man that were involved in a car accident, and it was a bad one, but both cars were demolished, and amazingly, however, neither one of them was actually hurt. So that was a good thing. And after they both crawled out of their cars, the woman says, so you're a man, and that's interesting, and I'm a woman, and wow, just look at our cars. Wow, there's nothing left. But, well, fortunately, we're unhurt. This must be a sign from God. That must mean that we should meet and be friends and live together in peace for the rest of our days. And the guy said, well, I agree with you completely that this must be a sign from God. The woman continued and looked at this. There's another miracle here. He says, my car is completely demolished, but this bottle of wine didn't break. Isn't that interesting? Surely God wants us to drink this wine and celebrate our good fortune. And then she hands him the bottle to the man, and the man agreed with her and nods his head and takes a great big drink of the bottle of wine and hands it back to her, and she thanks him and puts the cork in it and hands it back to him. And he says, well, aren't you going to have a drink? And she says, no, I think I'll just wait for the police. Sometimes the best lessons are how not to be. Sometimes the best stories are how not to be. So it's about not looking for your own personal best interest. In Colossians chapter 3, verse 12 through 15, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with a heart of mercy, of kindness, of humility, of gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another, forgiving one another. If someone happens to have a complaint against anyone, just as the Lord has forgiven you, so also forgive them. And to all these virtues add love, which is the perfect bond. Let the peace of Christ be in control in your heart, for you are in fact called to one body, to this peace, and be thankful. And so actually I want to close with a prayer. This is a prayer from Hafiz. You guys know I love the poet Hafiz. He says, I've come to this world to see this. I've come into this world to see this, a sword drop from men's hands even at the height of their arc of anger. Because we have finally realized that there is just one flesh to wound. And it is His, the Christ, our beloveds. I've come into this world to see this. All creatures hold hands as we pass through this miraculous existence we share on the way to an even greater being of soul. A being of just ecstatic light, forever entwined and at play with Him. I've come into this world to hear this, Every song the earth has sung since it was conceived in the divine's womb and begun spinning from his wish. Every song by wing and fin and hoof, every song by hill and field and tree and woman and child, every song of stream and rock, every song of tool and lyre and flute, every song of gold and emerald and fire, every song the heart should cry with magnificent dignity to know itself as God. For all other knowledge will leave us again in want and aching. Only imbibing the glorious Son will complete us. I've come into the world to experience this. Men so true to love, they would rather die before speaking an unkind word. Men so true their lives are His covenant, the promise of hope. I've come into this world to see this, the sword drop from men's hands even at the height of their arc of rage, because we have finally realized there is just one flesh we can wound. When I look around here, I see that one being, which is the Spirit of God at work in each and every one in this spiritual community, in each and every one of our lives, and there truly is only one in all of us. Breathe that in a moment and be willing to listen and know and feel that energy in that space as we move into our meditation time. Take a deep breath now, breathing into the heart space. Let your attention move down to the heart and be centered in the energy, the vibration of the heart with a feeling and a knowing of yes. Saying yes to our divine nature, saying yes to the peace that passes all understanding, saying yes to the possibilities of a healing light and love, saying yes to the spirit of love and gentleness, of humility, of courage. In all our relationships, in our agreements and disagreements, in all of our interactions and our relationships, we say yes to trust and know that there's something higher at work to reveal to us the spiritual gifts within us, to rise above, to see more clearly, to love more fully, to be present to the greater possibilities in our connections, to see more clearly through the eyes of spirit. To be able to put aside our limiting fears and doubts about ourselves or each other or others in our relationships, and trust and know that there's something higher moving us, teaching us, blessing us. We give thanks for the openness and the willingness to not only receive those blessings, but to know that those blessings are here to work in and through us, to bless those around us, those in our lives that we love and care deeply about, and those in our lives that call forth our patience, our forbearance, our mercy, our kindness, our forgiveness, our compassion. Each are a gift. Let your heart be filled with the willingness to accept the gifts of all of life's blessings in our community, in our relationships, and our relationship with our true being, and our relationship with who we think we are, so that it can be transformed to become even more of who we can be in this world. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Blessed Spirit, for all of those gifts. We give thanks. Feel a feeling of gratitude come into your heart. Breathe into that space, letting the energy of acceptance, of love, of appreciation fill from the very heart center, radiating outward through all aspects of our physical body, through our thoughts, through our emotions, out into our actions in life and in the world. And give thanks that we have the possibility and the opportunity to be a reflection of God in the world. Take a nice deep breath. Let your awareness come into this time and place. Take another nice deep breath. Begin to move around and bless the physical body. And another nice deep breath, and let your awareness be fully awake, aware, here and now, in the greater possibilities of love. And so it is. Amen.